Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. Hello, Roletta Studios. Hello to you. I think I have a question from you for on my list to answer. And please, if you wouldn't mind chatting me if you can see and hear me okay. I'm testing a slightly different setup, and I want to make sure all is coming through well. It appears everything's coming through my end. Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Great to have you here. I have a question from you as well, I believe. So, if this is your first time stumbling upon my channel, my name is Austen Menges, and I've been a pro editor for over 20 years, and I specialize in broadcast TV commercials. And thank you, Roulette. I appreciate that. And I also have started doing live streams where I answer subscriber questions live. So, thank you for being here. I've had a blast doing these. You guys are submitting awesome questions, and this is super fun with me or for me. And I'm just going to dive right in. And if you like editing content, you should check out my free editing guide. And then you'll be subscribed to my email. And I am going to prioritize questions from email subscribers first. And I have a bunch of good ones. Hello, Ripple Edit. Thanks for joining. Oh, also, please chat me where you're from. Anchor, great to see you again. Please chat your name, where you're from, and then put your questions in the chat. Even though I'm starting with questions that were emailed or put on my community wall, I will get to the chat questions too. So, chat, say hello, but I'm just going to dive right in, okay? So, I have a question from Doug, and he is in my course, and he had a great question. So, here we go. Doug says, I'm getting to the stage of my editing where I'm being part of a post production team. Go, Doug. That's awesome. Can you explain your workflow when working with colorists, musicians, and sound designers, and who is in charge of the final mastering and export? I love talking about this stuff. Oh, Jennifer, hello. Great to see you. Okay. In my world, I am in charge, to start at the end of the question, I'm in charge of the final mastering and export. So I'm sort of like the quarterback of the team when I am collaborating. It doesn't always have to be the editor. Sometimes things are finished at a post production facility where they are doing the online and finishing. But for me, in my world, I am doing my own online editing, and that's typically what it's called. Online editing requires some different skills than your typical creative editing. Can be very technical. So there is a huge technical aspect to managing a post-production team. And you're sort of the quarterback too, because you're giving everybody the assets they need to do their job well. And then you're collecting all the assets from everybody and assembling it into a final piece that is ready for broadcast. So I'm just going to go through and give you kind of a quick summary. Aldrin, thank you so much. I'm glad you're here for the third live stream. Appreciate it so much. I'm going to go through each of the people that or the jobs that you're collaborating with that Doug mentioned. So let's start with colorists. I love collaborating with colorists. I know a lot of editors these days are expected to do their own color, which is totally fine. But for me, I get to collaborate with some really awesome colorists. And what my workflow looks like for that is typically I will have a copy of all the raw footage, and then they will also have a copy of all the raw footage. So I'm usually editing in Premiere Pro, and in my rough cuts, I will just typically put on the LUT, which stands for lookup table that the cinematographer chose on set. And so I will just have that so I kind of have a cohesive look through all the rough cut process. And then when we picture lock and it's time for color, I will export what I call, or what in the industry we call a reference QuickTime of basically where my final edit, what it ended up looking like, sounding like exactly. And then I'll export an XML file that basically tells when my V colorist pulls it in, it tells them to pull in all the right clips. So it basically rebuilds the timeline. And then they're going through with the raw media and he's doing all of the color. Okay. And then he gives back to me. Typically, we're mastering at Apple ProRes 4444. So he'll do the final color and then he will give me back Apple ProRes 444. He will also typically send me an XML file. So then I pull in his XML file and it creates a sequence that is attached to his final color renders. So that's a quick, simplified explanation of how I work with colorists. Now, musicians or composers, it's a little different. So you typically, or I typically, when you have a rough cut, you've probably put in some temp music. Okay, so you have all your sound design, you might have some ambiances, some dialogue, some specific sound effects, and then you have music, temp track. Now, depending on the composer, they might want to hear what you have put in for temp music, or they might want to go in without hearing anything that you've put in as far as temp music because they kind of want to put their own spin on it and they don't want to be affected by um, what you have already put in. So, what you need to deliver to a composer is a reference file similar to what you delivered to a colorist. But one key change is you want to have time code generated on the file. So, like if you're in Premiere Pro, you can go to effects and put a time code generator. So it's reading the time code from the sequence and it's displaying that on the actual video file. And this is really important because when the composer is composing their music, they want to be frame accurate. So they want to see exactly the right frame. So then when I sync up their music, I can sync it up exactly how they intended. And if they don't want to hear their temp music, you would mute the temp music and just give them all of the audio that goes along with the film, which is probably, like I said, ambiances, dialogue, specific sound effects. And then you might want to create a different version that has the temp music in case they do want to listen to it. So that's kind of what I would deliver to a composer. And what they're delivering back to me are stems or splits. And that's where they'll probably deliver me a final mix of their composed tracks. But then they're going to deliver stems where they put different groups of instruments on different tracks so that there is some flexibility in the final sound mix. Say we're in the final sound mix and there's a really cool percussion part, and we want to bring that up a little louder compared to the strings, for instance. Well, with stems, we would just go to the stem that has all the percussion parts, and we would raise that up a little bit. So that is um, how I would deliver to a composer. And then finally, a sound designer, a sound mixer, I'm delivering a reference QuickTime, which shows exactly where my latest edit ended up. And then I would deliver an AAF file out of Premiere Pro, which you can also deliver an AAF out of almost any editing software. And that basically collects all of the sound you've worked on in Premiere and then allows them to bring it into Pro Tools, and it kind of pops up as you had it. And you can even add heads and tails to all the audio clips, and they can basically start where you left off, which is so key. And they're also going to be delivering back to me a final mix in like a 4816 wave file, and also stems where they separate dialogue, um, sound effects, and music in case we want to change some of that later. All right. So I would say that gives you a good start, Doug. And thank you for your question. Great question. Okay. Aldrin, I'll throw this in since he asked related to this. That's interesting. How about VFX animation collaboration workflow? Great question. That's similar to what I would deliver to the colorist. I would deliver now, the colorist typically has all the raw footage, but for a VFX or animation collaboration, I probably just need to send them one or two shots. So I would do that myself, and I would bring up the shot in the source window of Premiere Pro. I would add about a second of heads and tails to it, and then I would turn off the LUT so that they're getting the full raw data. Okay. And then so they would have that, just the raw shot with a second of heads and tails, with all the effects turned off, the LUT turned off. And I would also give them a reference QuickTime. You always want to give a reference so whoever you're working with can put into context what they're doing. So then the VFX artist would have that, and it would be an Apple ProRes 4444. That's sort of the gold standard, unless you have RAW you're going to give them, but that's sometimes a little overkill. And then what they're going to give you back is the exact same specs you delivered at. So they're going to give it back to you raw, same aspect ratio, same size. And then you put it in your online sequence. You gather everything up from everybody that I told you about, and you put it in a new sequence where everything comes together. It's a really fun part of editing when all the collaborators send you something and you're putting in kind of this finished product before you export. So that's pretty much the VFX animation. And now I'm going to move on to Jennifer, who's in the chat. Hey, Jennifer, she asked a great question. She took my course, and I'm really thankful for this question. What are hiring managers looking for in a portfolio when someone is building one? And a follow up, a lot of jobs are looking for social media editing. What does that entail? Okay, hiring managers. I'm going to give you my best bit of advice. I actually have some content coming out where I lay out all of my business advice. That's going to come out soon. But here's my best advice when you're putting together a portfolio. Go and research um, exactly what the hiring manager is looking for in terms of what do they make. So let's just put out an example. Let's say there's a hiring manager at a company and they're hiring an internal editor. Go and look at that company and see what video content they're putting out. Maybe the majority of it are little brand documentaries, for instance. You want to show them exactly the type of content that they're looking for. You want to show them that you've made something that is exactly like the type of stuff they do, and you've successfully done it with good results. The more you can connect what the client wants with projects you've already completed, the higher the chance you have at getting the job. Because a great producer, if you put yourself in their shoes, they want to hire somebody who is guaranteed to be able to do the job. So they're going to look for exactly that they've done what um, they've done that before and have had success doing it. That's what I look for when I'm hiring an editor, and that's what people look for. So, for instance, if I'm going out to get a commercial job, I go and see what types of commercials they've produced before, and say it's a lot of comedy. Well, I'm going to make a reel that's just my comedy commercials, my best ones, and that's what I'm going to send because it's going to click in their mind and they're going to say, "Oh, that's exactly what I need." If we go, "Hey, MMWOSU, yeah, live stream Wednesdays. These are super fun. I really enjoy them. So thanks for being here, everybody." But yeah, the more we can connect what we've done with what they need, the better. And that's what I recommend. Now, if you don't have exactly what they need, I think you need to try and make that. You need to somehow do a project or create a project or find a course that has a project that kind of matches that. Okay. I think a lot of editors, and I've made this mistake too, we kind of make a reel that's like all this disparate stuff. Like when I started out, I would have a reel that had like a documentary scene and a narrative short film and one commercial and this and that. And it's hard for people that want to hire you to put the dots together or, yeah, put it together. So it's better to just be as simple and straightforward as possible. And so that's why I always recommend custom demo reels depending on who's hiring you. And then the follow up question, what is social media editing? That's a great question. I think social media editing, depending on the platform, sort of has its own language. So and I was gonna say, just because I'm a commercial editor, don't think I don't also have to make social media edits because now every commercial, even for broadcast TV, has an Instagram version, a LinkedIn version, a Snapchat version, all these things, right? So I get a different set of specs. So I finish the broadcast TV commercial, which is typically a 30-second spot or a 15-second spot, sometimes a 6-second spot as well. And then I get this long list of deliverables for all these social platforms. And that means a different aspect ratio, meaning it's not just widescreen. Um, It's like, for instance, Instagram is vertical, so that's 9 by 16. I think LinkedIn is 4 by 5. Facebook is 1 by 1. They all have their different sets. And then often um, they also need closed captioning, okay? So it's these little things like this language. Now, sometimes they also just need to be way shorter and more exciting. And again, whoever's asking about social media editing, I would go research exactly what type of social media editing they're currently doing so that you can see and match that. And if you've never done it before, I would actually recommend make your own social media versions. So take a project you've done and make a social media version. Make it vertical, add captions, make it shorter and punchier. So you have something on your reel that matches kind of that social media aesthetic, if that's what you're going for. So those are some of my ideas for that. So Backroads Nomad Official. Oh, when do we get to see the final results of the Lone Star spot? Thank you for your comment. Thanks for everybody who watched that and for your ideas. We are going to Scott and I are going to get together and try them, and we're going to come up with a new version, and we'll make a follow-up video. I'm not sure exactly when it'll be, but I'm excited about that. So thank you. And then Roletta says, I think commercial and trailer editors are much smarter and skilled than normal editors. Oh, the time crunch. Yeah, when you're under the gun, that takes a special set of skills to be able to do things with excellence at a high speed. I agree. Oh, and then Roletta, you also asked, are VFX done first or the color? The VFX are done first in my workflows because you give them the raw and then they do the VFX. They add the VFX to the raw. I get back the raw and then I send all the raw off to the colorist and then he puts the color on top of the visual effects. Okay, I want to get to another question. I've got kind of a lot here, which is great. I have one from Eileen, who's an email subscriber. She says, do you have any suggestions for good pacing when editing unconventional scenes? I'm currently working on a project that has a faux infomercial segment within an otherwise traditional narrative structure. That's such a cool question. Well, one, it's awesome you're working in a traditional narrative structure, but then you have this infomercial segment inside of it. And here's what came to mind. It's hard to give exact advice without seeing it, but I wanted to touch on something that I thought of when I read this question. Basically, when you're making a parody, or you're just trying to, maybe it's not a parody in terms of comedy, but you're trying to get the infomercial feel, you do want to be true to that genre. So the infomercial genre. So it's probably slow, it's probably boring. However, while you want to be true to the genre, I think you have to think in terms of how it feels relative to your traditional narrative scene. So I think basically what I'm saying is there's some creative license, like maybe a traditional infomercial is super slow and boring. Well, that doesn't really work. That may not really work in the context of a traditional narrative. People might get too bored. So you can take some creative license. This is what I would try. I would make one a little faster that fits more with the scene. And just so you have that relative switch from when you're going, you got your normal scene, you cut to the infomercial, it has a certain feel to it. You cut back and keep the audience going. So that is what came to mind when you asked that question. And congrats on it. Sounds like you have a fun project to work on. Okay. What is my workflow? How am I managing my bins and timeline? That is a great question. I need to get my Premiere going here. So I'm going to do another question while I get that set up. And I'm going to answer a question from Larico from Brazil. How often do you see editors undervaluing their skills or just being unable to reach a new level? I'm asking this because I live in Brazil and I do freelance for clients overseas. My colleagues that only work for local clients are severely underpaid and underappreciated. I appreciate this question a lot, and I'm sorry for your friends. I'm glad you have found some work that works for you. And I would say I have seen both. It is actually I've seen editors undervalue their skills and overvalue their skills. And to some degree, we're probably doing one or the other because it's very difficult to be self-aware. So I recommend you have to have a mentor or maybe somebody, a collaborator that you show your stuff to, and you can see where you're at, okay? And then you want to go for jobs at around your same level or a little bit up, right? And um, you can do spec work to get better stuff on your reel that is more like the stuff you want to edit. So there are ways to level up. I can't speak much to um, editing overseas versus editing locally. I think that's a fabulous idea. It sounds like you've done it successfully where you realized the local rates were kind of low, so you went overseas. So I think that's actually really smart. But one thing you can do is just um, encourage your friends and be encouraging, and maybe you can help them along and help them kind of figure out what you did to get clients. Okay, I am going to turn my screen share on so I can talk a little bit about bins and workflow to answer Miroslav. All right, bear with me. I'm gonna set up my Premiere. All right, we have my Premiere open. So I'm gonna do a little something here. All right. Okay, so quickly, I think the key with bins, and I have a video on file organization. I think the thumbnail says stop organizing if you want to check that out. I make it very simple. I have a pretty simple bin setup that I turn into a template in Premiere. And I use the same bins every time, and whenever I open a new Premiere project, they're already there. So you can probably read them here: assets, color, graphic effects, short into GFX. I wouldn't normally have something called graphic. I would delete that. Media mix, music, sequences, SFX, stems. This is kind of everything. And then I have a corresponding group of folders on my hard drive that almost match this exactly, except obviously there's no sequences because those are only in Premiere. And then I have, um, yeah, there's just no sequences. But I have an exports folder on my hard drive, obviously, and no exports folder in the editor. And then, yeah, I just have my timeline open. And I was just going to show you one quick thing that was a game changer for me. And that is, okay, so let's say this is where I started editing, right? Well, first, I can quickly go between these two sequences with a hotkey. So that's helpful. But let's say this is my working sequence. So I've grabbed these two shots of waves, I put them together. But then let's say this is my string out. So this is all my footage. So let's say I want to get a different take of the waves, okay? So I do something, I match frame the waves shot with a hotkey. It brings it up in my source window. So now you can see, or I can do it to this one. So basically, I match framing means it takes this clip, it brings it up in my source window, and then I go to my string out, and then I hit a hotkey, and it takes me exactly to the shot. So let's say my cursor is over here. You see how it's jumping to the shot? So it's basically finding my shot. It's called reverse match frame. That is a game changer. So if you have all your stuff in a one string out, let's do it with the other shot. So I match frame, takes me right to it. Okay. So that's kind of how I'm navigating through all my shots. Um, I highly recommend you look that up. I custom mapped my keyboard, which I recommend everybody does. Okay. Because it's just going to save you so much time in the long run. But basically, I have one sequence, like a rough cut sequence going, and then I quickly can go to my string out back and forth. And that's sort of how that works. So I did want to bring that up for everybody. So thank you, Miroslav. Thank you, Larico. And Tom, I'm up to your question. I think Tom was in the chat. So I appreciate you being here. And Tom says, oh, this is great because I'm going to answer in two different ways, Tom. So you said you're struggling with workflow and you're a part-time YouTuber. See, I can relate. I'm a part-time YouTuber. Juggling it with work, you take it seriously, but you obsess over detail and take much longer than you need to editing your videos. What are some basic tips for chunking up the work to get a good end result in a more efficient way? So I'm going to answer this from two different perspectives. One is as a person doing YouTube. And man, what I would say is I really, like for me, I have to keep my priorities straight, which is so hard because I love this phrase. You don't want perfect to get in the way of good enough. So I'd say with your YouTube videos, write down what is most important. This is kind of what I do. What's most important to me is that I get a video out pretty regularly, like once a week at least. And that's the most important. So everything else is below that, right? So I might have to sacrifice on quality in certain places to meet that main goal. So I would think about that. That might help you switch something in your brain where you can think, you know what? My main priority is to get this video out. So I am going to not do this or this or this. That's helpful. Now, as an editor for my clients, that is not an option. I am aiming more for perfection on their behalf, especially for ad agencies. Um, so we do have to come up with ways to be faster without sacrificing quality. And one thing I recommend is that you take a look at your entire workflow and see, like, spend some time away from your computer, write down your workflow, and see if you can find any inefficiencies that you could clean up. Like, for instance, mapping hotkeys to your keyboard. That's one of my main ways to move fast. That has saved me who knows how much of my life over the past 20 years. Also, you might decide as a creative editor, you can make a workflow that kind of works better for you, meaning I like to get my sequence all organized because that uses one side of my brain. So I'll do all of that in a row, kind of wears me out. But syncing, making a string out, um, picking selects, it's just like this beautiful organization, right? Then I kind of take a break and come back later to do the creative stuff. That's kind of one of my little tricks. You might want to chunk up your process and try to become self-aware when you can um, yeah, where you can save time. Okay. So those are just some ideas. Oh, another big one is how things are shot. There may be a way you can shoot that saves you time later. For instance, I'll just tell you a real example. I have some audio gear I really love. So I was going into an Apollo Twin X into my Universal Audio 4710D preamp, but I was recording double system audio. For this very live stream and possibly for my next videos, I'm going to go straight to camera by plugging in my Shure SM7DB into a Zoom F3, line out into the camera. Is it going to sound as good? Probably not. Will it be close enough and worth the time savings? I hope so. That's my hope. So we all have to make compromises. So I'm basically giving you permission to make some compromises to meet your personal goals. So that was a great question. I think we've all struggled with that. So thank you for asking. So I've got a few. Oh, GG Slav. Let me say hi to everybody. Um, Tom. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Tom. He says that was helpful for the perspective. I think that's good. GGSLAV have been watching your channel. Oh, thank you. Oh, I really appreciate everybody who um, um, is watching and who has supported my channel. You guys are so kind. Oh, Roletta Studios, when he mentioned time crunch, he meant putting more info into a 30-second slot. Yes. You know, one of my favorite quotes, Roletta, is I think Pascal. It's attributed to different people, but he said, "Sorry, I wrote you a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." And I love that because I edit commercials and it's really hard to make stuff short. It's hard to make stuff short and great. So I'm just gonna let me scan through just so I can say hi to everybody. Um, yes. So Anchor brought up a channel called Melody Sheep. Oh, I've never heard of them. I'll have to look them up. I can't answer the question because I'm not familiar with it. Paranoid Android. Oh, have I ever experienced burnout from editing? Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I'm going to come back to that. Yes, that is such a great question. I think that we always end up there at some point. Um, Yo Yo New says, thanks for all the videos. Well, thank you. Excellent. Any suggestions where I can learn more? I'm going to think about that. Have you been watching your? Oh, thank you. Thank you. And Vlado Edits. He has a question about commercial copyrights. Okay, let me get back to that one. Okay. I have 3 more questions from my email list, so you guys keep adding questions to the chat because I can go 30 more minutes, I think. But I'm going to answer a question from Keshav from the email. He's an email subscriber and frequent commenter. Thank you if you're here. So he says, I would like to ask, did you ever need to edit the music to fit a scene? And how do you approach this problem since you're also a composer? I would like to know your thoughts on it. Yes, I almost always edit the music um, in my edits. So I rarely take the music at face value. And I'm speaking particularly over about music I license or library music, because obviously when I'm working with a composer, they're creating something custom. But when I'm pulling in tracks, I have a lot of things I'm thinking about. Okay. I'm thinking about obviously if the track itself fits, but I'm also trying to find just the right parts of the music that work for the emotion and the rhythm and what's going on in the scene, the story. So, say you have a 3-minute music track. Say we got one from Artlist. Here's my Artlist uh, thing here, and say I download this track. Okay, you can probably see. You see where my mouse is on this track. I can see the waveform because I do this so often. Maybe you can too. I can actually see this is where obviously this is where the music ends because it's the end. But see how the waveform gets quieter and has an ending that fades out? That ending is something I might want to use if I want the music to end in the edit at a certain spot. So I might have this waveform, and actually, let's just see if this little test of art list. Oh, look at that. We just dragged in. Oh, didn't quite work. All right. We just have a music track, although I'm not seeing the waveform. All right, we'll just look at it here. I might be humming along in the music at a part I like, and then I'm actually going to cut in the ending. So I'm going to make a music edit. Maybe we're going along right here. Then I'm going to cut to this ending here. Okay. And to get that feeling of an ending. You also might do the same with an intro because intros have a different feel. So I might use this intro and then I might cut all the way to here in the song. Hopefully you can see my mouse. Um, or see this little part, I can tell there's like a transition in the music, like a musical change. This frame right here in the waveform, without even listening to this track, that might be a perfect place to use on a cut where I want the music to go from bigger or louder to quieter. So I'm always thinking about the different parts of the songs. Okay. So that's one level of music editing. The other level is if I click on this button, this says there are stems available. So check it out. Say you find a song you really love. Well, you can download all the tracks separately, which is fabulous because you know what? Another type of editing music is putting in the instruments you want. Okay. Oh, look, this is working again. So, see, for instance, the electronic drums and the bass, I have them separately. So perhaps I'm at a point in my edit. Maybe we just put this over here. I'm at a point in the edit where on this edit, um, I want the bass to come in. So the bass is out, and right on this edit, I have the bass come in. So that's going to happen, right? Um, so those are kind of two ways you can think about choosing parts of the song, but then when they're available, and pulling things in and out that make sense and add to the emotional impact. Okay, excellent. Okay, Roletta, you've been asking great questions already. I've got to your question. Thanks for posting it. And congrats on your channel. It looks awesome. You said you have an upcoming web series and you feel like it's never ending. I think, can everybody in the chat agree that we've all had projects that felt like they were never ending? Um, what do you suggest we should do? Hire more editors or just let it take time? Any other solution to speed up the process without compromising the quality? Such a great question. This is a question that we probably all run up against at some point, especially when you're working with footage, really big project reference. I would have to kind of see your whole to give an answer as if I were a post supervisor or a post producer. But me personally, I'd bring on more editors because when projects linger too long, it can really kill morale. So I would want to keep the energy up and the positivity up. And I would have a supervising editor and then some other editors, and we would all be cranking, would um, cranking along, and then we'd get things done so much faster. The supervising editor would kind of make all the other editing match. Now there are hard problems with that too, because then you're collaborating. Then you have to have maybe a Premiere Pro project situation, which can sometimes be a challenge. Um, but yeah, I would go the more editors route just because when things linger on longer than they're supposed to, can really be hard for morale. But what also I would do before that is I would write down. I teach in my course like a technical workflow document, and this is something I make at the beginning of projects to get on the same page as everybody, including the cinematographer and the director, but then everybody down the line, the colorist, the VFX artist, the motion graphics artist, the sound mixers, and basically come up with the most streamlined workflow possible. And I highly recommend you do that. The bigger the project, the more important it is to do that because you can find little tweaks that make a um, huge time savings and efficiency improvements down the line. Just like I mentioned with doing on camera audio instead of having everything synced and separate later. A little tweak like that could save you. Or, for instance, I was shooting a or I was working on a commercial, and my friend Rick Diaz, who was shooting it, he shot RE RAW um, instead of ProRes, and RE RAW was awesome, and we needed it in that case, but it was so big and cumbersome that it kind of made some inefficiencies in the workflow down the line. So for the next project, I spoke to the colorist and I realized, no, let's just stick to Apple ProRes Quad 4 going forward. Those little tweaks can save you so much time down the road. So recognize when they happen, make sure your workflow is as efficient as possible first, and then later think about adding more editors. But great question, and it sounds like a super fun project. So congrats. Okay, I got another question that came in from George. This is the last one from my email list. Again, if you want to get on my email list, download my free guide. I've worked really hard on that and people seem to really like it. So if you don't have it, and I don't spam, I don't email a ton. So I think you would be pleased to get notifications on certain things. So George asks, how do you manage the moments when you feel there is not enough coverage for a scene? That is such a good question. I think a lot of us have been there. That is really where your creativity has to come in. It has happened to me, not too many times. I can't think of a specific experience, but I certainly think that that has happened. And you pretty much just have to think hard and try everything you can think of to make things work. One thing that comes to mind is if you truly don't have something, and you could always do a pickup shot, although that can be very expensive. But I have been on projects where they had to go back and shoot something with a skeleton crew. That is a hard thing to stomach for the producers who have to spend all the money on that. You can fix certain things with voiceover. You can fix certain things by pulling different shots from different sections of the movie, changing the order of scenes. When you have an issue like that to solve, you really have to pull out all the stops and pretty much try everything in your editing bag of tricks. Um, but it can be tough. So I feel you. But it's a great question. And it does happen. Happens to all of us, I think. And then he asked a really good question that I wanted to touch on. Do you think it's better to be on set or to wait for the footage to work with? I think both of them have their merits for sure. And I personally prefer to be on set, but I absolutely understand the benefits of seeing footage fresh because you delete all of or a lot of your biases. And I'm going to speak to the benefits of waiting for footage first. There's so many biases when you're working on a creative project, right? And one of them is when you see something on set, Like, let me give you a real life example. Everybody on set, they're working on a comedy commercial, let's say, and the actors do something that makes everybody in the studio or on the location laugh, okay? So everybody laughed, so they remember that. But let's say you weren't there, so you're editing and you weren't on set, and you are watching all the takes, and that take is not the funniest take. It was actually, when it was cut into the project, it was actually this other take where it wasn't funny in real life on set in person, but it's funniest in the context of the actual edit. And so, because you didn't have that bias, if you were there, you might have picked the one that everybody laughed at. So, that is a huge benefit. However, being on set, in my opinion, there's so many benefits. One is if you can manage to disconnect that bias, which I think I can. I can be pretty, I can kind of compartmentalize and put that away and realize once I'm in the edit suite, and this is after lots of experience. Once I'm in the edit suite, I am able to look at stuff with fresh eyes. And I know that what worked on set may not work in the editing room. So I'm willing to give everything an equal opportunity, right? But going on set is great. One is you get to meet people. I'm an introvert, but it's so important for our careers and just to make friends. It On set is wonderful because you're sort of in the trenches with all these people. You can get to know the cinematographers you're working with, which is huge. Um, you can spend more time with the director you're working with. You might meet other people, other producers. A lot of people have questions on how to get more editing jobs, and the main answer is you have to meet more people in real life. That's one of my main pieces of advice. Um, where can you meet a bunch of film people in real life? On a film set, and you never know who you're going to become friends with. But what I also like is there's things you learn. There are things I learn when I'm on set that I just wouldn't, that just help me and save me so much time in the editing room. For instance, I know what the director was happy with. I know what takes he liked the most, and he's going to want to see those. So, unlike kind of the general room, maybe everybody laughed, but the director really does have his vision in mind. And so, I want to know what takes matched his vision the most. And it's really cool to see that on set. And I kind of circle the take, and then I kind of know a good starting point. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to be the perfect take in the end, but it's a great start. Also, I have an understanding of any technical issues that came up. I don't know if any of you have gotten a batch of footage and there's like some random shots at the end and you're like, why are those there? What are those for? Or there's a spot that had no audio recorded. All these little things where that you can really be scratching your head about in post production. If I'm on set, I understand why all that happened. Okay, the sound recordist didn't record on that take, and then the camera card did something weird, so there was a duplicate thing, and then this was a reshoot, and these were some wild lines. So having all that in my head, it's like this incredible shortcut. So I personally highly recommend um, going to set, and I would just say you might as well try. Right, give it a try if you get the opportunity, even if you have to go to just mingle and say, "Hey, I'm the editor. I just came to help and to be here." I would highly recommend it. Go see what it's like and report back to me, and then edit the project and see if you were able to maintain that unbiased view um, throughout the process. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I'm going to read through a couple comments from the chat. Add more. We have like 15 minutes left. We can also end early if we need to, but hit me. Okay. Thanks, Backroads Nomad. You are very kind. I really appreciate you. Yes, please subscribe and like. It helps the YouTube. Thank you so much, everybody. Some really nice questions. Oh, Vlado asked about the copyrights on my commercial projects. Is it relatively easy to post any work you've done on your own social profile, or do you have to ask for some sort of permission? I usually ask for permission, and I usually wait um, a considerable amount of time since it released. And yeah, that's it. And if anybody saw something, oh, there's another big point to this, which is all of my videos are very positive. So I love my clients and they're getting, you know, their brand out there a little more. And if they had a problem with any of my videos, I would just unlist it. So it would be fairly drama free. But I work with some really amazing clients and we have a lot of fun together. So there are certain things I don't post because there's an NDA or I think it could be problematic for them. And then I just try to stick to projects with my really friendly clients so I can show you behind the scenes of the different edits. Um, okay, let's see. GG Slav had a question here. Commercials are, as far as I know, scripted. Do you use string outs as source or some other approach when editing footage? I use string outs for my commercials, and what I do is, I think this might be in, um, I think this might be in my organization video. It's called file structure and organization. But I do a string out. I make a little, I take a little graphic and I put the shot number. So there's these little markers, little chapter markers in my string out, and then I'll put them in story order. So it'll probably be shot 101, for instance, then shot 102, shot 103. And then I take all the takes and I usually trim them from right before the director calls action and right after the director calls cut. And then one thing I do, which I've said before on the channel, is I put the last take first and then I go backwards. Because usually, especially if you know the director, a lot of times the last take is the best. A lot of times the second to last take is the best, actually. And this really depends on who you're working with. But a lot of times, if you're on a commercial set, the director will get something that they think works and they're kind of done, but then they do another one for safety. So sometimes it's the second to last take. However, sometimes it's the first take. So you really do have to give everything an equal opportunity. But what I like watching it from last to first because I'm sort of seeing the first impression of the footage is um I'm seeing what the director had in mind, where he got to with that last take. And does that make sense? And then it's sort of almost falling apart as you go back to the beginning because on a commercial set, you often don't have a rehearsal day with the actors. So that very first take is really like pretty raw. And then, and also the dolly grip might be figuring out how fast the camera's moving. The camera operator is going to be figuring things out. The DP might be adjusting some lights um, toward the end. So you might get, like, I'll have the DP come up to me if I'm on set. And after maybe the fourth take, he whispers in my ear, "Hey, try to use takes after this. I just added a little light." So everybody's kind of perfecting the scene. And so those last takes are usually where the money is. I will also say this: I'm always combining different audio with different visuals. So in terms of visual performance and everything's buttoned up toward the end, the actor might have said something a certain way in an earlier take. So I want to give this tip to you to take really seriously. Always consider using audio and video separately because it is shocking how often I will combine a separate audio take with a separate visual take, especially in a commercial, obviously with narrative dialogue. And actors are usually delivering their lines in such a way where most of the times it will sync up. So yeah, basically a string out of all the shots, and they're all in one sequence. And like I showed you earlier, I can switch between my string out and my main rough cut very quickly and build things like that. So yeah, that's kind of a little on string outs. I hope that was helpful. Roletta says, with DaVinci's AI tools, you can automatically trim the music correctly. I think that is super cool. I don't know if Premiere has something like that, but if they do, I'm totally going to try it. I am trying to use, I know AI is very controversial, especially since there's a lot of AI editing tools. My opinion is we should embrace it as editors to help us. So we still control post production, but we're using AI to help us. And then down the line, it's also helping our clients. So anything we can do faster with AI, I think we totally should try. I would love to see what those plugins do and how they trim up the music. I think those types of shortcuts are really cool because it's also just giving you ideas, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to love it. You can always go in and make tweaks. But I think it's cool if you could just say, um, "Hey, we got a first draft here on the music edit." I think that's sweet. Okay, Tom Downs, thanks for being here. Along with the last segment, do you have a standard level when ducking for dialogue? No, not particularly. It really depends on the context. I know I've said this. This sounds like just a canned answer, but use your ears. Definitely err on the side of clear dialogue because dialogue is the star of the show. It could be 6 dB, it could be 8 dB, it could be 12 dB. It really depends. Um, Probably 6 dB is the minimum, depending on what's going on, because you really want the dialogue to poke out. But there are situations, depending on the context, where maybe you don't want the dialogue to poke out very much. One thing I love to do, which I highly recommend, is take a minute to watch some of your favorite films. Um, yeah, take a minute to watch some of your favorite films, but instead of watching them for entertainment, listen to them carefully and listen to what's happening in the sound mix. That is a really fun exercise, and I find myself doing that a lot actually. And you'll start hearing the way they use the soundtrack for transitions and then the different sound mixing levels. Like in an action movie, for instance, they don't want the dialogue um, perfectly easy to hear and out there. You might hear a bunch of commotion around them. And then other scenes, the dialogue is really hot and everything else is really quiet. So it's a really case by case situation, but I would recommend use your ears, err on the side of the dialogue poking through for most cases, and watch some of your favorite media with the sound mix in mind. I need to do that more as well. That's a beautiful way to practice. Okay, backgrounds nomad official says, do you or have you done any voice acting? Your VO and the Lone Star spot sounded very professional. Well, thank you very much. I am trying to remember. Oh, on the rough cut? I do. It's hilarious. As an editor, have had, um, maybe you all have had this experience where you have to put in temp voiceover. Now we have this whole AI look on this. Um, I don't use this much, but I have done some tests. I don't think it's quite there yet, the AI voiceover. Personally, I think actors are still safe, in my personal professional opinion. But because I do so many commercials, we don't usually record the voiceover till the end. So I have to do temp voiceover, so I kinda have fun with that. So I do love it. Occasionally, my voice will make it into a commercial. So I technically am not a voice actor, but I appreciate that, and I thank you. I really enjoy I get a kick out of it when I get to record the temp voiceover. So I appreciate that. Okay, what is the best way to determine which music will perfectly suit a video? Oh, that's such a good question. You're my favorite editor. Oh, you are so kind from Bangladesh. I love the global aspect of this community. It is so fun. I get such a kick out of this. That's one of my favorite things about this is that we can all be together from all over. Finding the best music to strike an emotion is such a great topic. I'm going to make a video on that. Um, it's very subjective, but I think I can offer some objective advice because there are certain things that work. For instance, what do you come up or what emotions come up for you when you even think about a solo piano playing slowly in a minor key? That's a thing. What about a big orchestra that's playing at a fast tempo with a French horn? What about a rock band with a distorted electric guitar playing fast? Those all evoke kind of emotions. Those are all a little bit cliche, but I think we can be guided by some of those. And I have it on pretty high on my list um, to do a video on that. I'm really actually pretty pumped for it. So thanks for bringing that up again because now I know it's worth doing. Okay. What is the best way? Oh, sorry, I just answered that. John Howard, thank you. What are some invisible editing decisions that viewers never notice but make all the difference? Oh, that's a great question. I would say the J cut and L cut in dialogue scenes in particular. It's the power of the reaction shot, and it's really fun. If you get a chance to edit a dialogue scene, it's so key who you are on visually, what actor you're on visually while you're hearing certain pieces of dialogue. So, this is another fun thing to do. Watch one of your favorite movies in the dialogue scenes and watch how it's edited and watch where the visuals are cutting to based on what the audio is doing. So this actor said this during this line of this actor, I'm actually on who they're talking to. And during this line, I'm on them, and then back and forth. And it's a really beautiful dance, having all those J cuts. And a J cut is just when the audio of the next shot comes in before you cut to it. And then the opposite of that is an L cut, where the you see the visual before you hear the audio. Okay, or did I get that right? Or yeah, the audio comes in before, and then the L, yeah, the audio of the take continues into the next shot. So I'd say that is really cool. Oh, Roletta, just what a nice compliment. He says he has his team watch my channel, among others. Sandeep, he's in his 12th. After this, I want to pursue my career in editing. Can you guide me? Yeah, keep watching my channel. Um, there's a lot. I make a lot of stuff. A lot is available for free. I want everybody to have access. I'm going to keep doing live streams. I'm going to keep posting videos. Download my free guide. If you want to go further, obviously, I do recommend my course. My course is not meant to be this um, thing where you don't interact with me. You actually do. I have a community for students, and I give you feedback on your edits. That's the thing that changed my editing the most. When I found a mentor who watched my edits, he also knew emotional storytelling, and he gave me feedback. So if you can get in my course, I'd love to work with you. I'm having a blast. Okay, Vlado, ever tempted to get into shooting or directing? Oh, there was another question up here about being burnt out. I want to make sure I get to the burnt out question. Were you ever tempted to get into shooting or directing? Oh, he says sometimes he gets a project and he thinks I could have shot this a lot better. That's hilarious. Yes, that does happen, doesn't it? I I did direct some short films. I went to film school intending to direct, and I did some shorts, and I had a lot of fun. But my favorite part of the process was editing. So I kind of stuck to that, and I've had a blast. Luckily, these days, I get to work with people who are really talented and they direct better than I ever could or dream of. And I'm very blessed that I get to work with cinematographers who shoot incredible footage. So that's one of the reasons I love commercials so much. I'm not a Hollywood editor. I edit commercials, but I get a steady stream of beautiful footage to work with and make my own schedule, and that makes me ecstatic. And okay, let's see. I'm going to talk about being burnt out. Oh, Praniv Patil, big thanks for the gold advice you keep sharing. My pleasure. Thanks to all you for all your kindness. I'm going to talk about burnout because I'm going to make this my last question because I have to run in a couple minutes. And thank you so much for being here, everybody. Yes, I had a huge burnout in the middle of my career, and it has to do with a lot of factors. One of my main clients was I was an internal editor and producer at a global communications company. I was also editing commercials. I was still technically I had my own business, but the large majority was this one client, and it was a lot of internal corporate videos. So I was creatively unfulfilled. And then the other key is that when you're in a position like that, you're getting requests from a lot of different departments, and those people were not really like-minded collaborators. They were more like marketing people or product people. And so I really was burnt out big time. Now, that contract went away, and because that company got sold to private equity, so they closed their creative office. So I was without my biggest customer. And that was a really hard point in my editing career, but it forced me to rethink how I was going to approach my career. And that's funny because I'm actually coming out with a whole series as part of my course, like a new module or an upgrade module or whatever, about how to become an in demand editor where you get to work on projects you like with people you like and charge premium rates. That's kind of been what I've been working on the past 5 years. And now I would say I'm at a point in my career where I'm very happy. But it's kind of that funny social media thing where everybody's posting all the best stuff that's happening to them. But I want to make sure you guys know I've had all the hard times too that you can think of. It hasn't always been this way. I've been, laid off from editing jobs. I've had difficult clients. I've edited stuff I don't like. Um, I just happen to be now in a position that I'm very thankful for. So, if you are experiencing any of those times, I also had incredible anxiety. I talked about this, I think, in my what I learned from editing lots of commercials. I realized that my job it wasn't just my job that was making me anxious. I actually had a legitimate anxiety disorder, pretty much, to get a little vulnerable on here. But I worked through a lot of that. It's an ongoing process. But now I'm in a great place. So if any of you are going through hard times, just know that I'm with you, and we all do. And even though on social media some people look like things are going really well for them, we've all gone through really tough stuff. So hang in there. Um, oh man, how to communicate with clients. Yeah, I have a video coming up on difficult clients, um, and that'll be interesting. All right. I am so thankful for everybody that you're all in here, and I'm gonna plan on doing these most Wednesdays. And this was a different time. I don't know how 12 p.m. worked for people, but it'll be kind of early morning or 9 a.m. Central Time to noon. Please come back, download my free guide. If you don't have it yet, you'll get on my email list. You can ask me questions. I'll prioritize subscriber questions, and check out my course if you would like. No pressure, of course, but it has been really fun, and students are making progress, which is the whole point of it. So thank you for being on here, and happy editing, everybody.